Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar titled, How Are Tolls Affecting Your Profitability Lane? I am TCA's Director of Education, Shayna Gibson, and on behalf of TCA's entire leadership team, I would like to thank you for joining us today. I would also like to express our sincere appreciation to Geotab for their generosity in sponsoring today's webinar. A few reminders before we get started. Attending TCA's educational events, such as this webinar, provides you with an opportunity to earn a certificate in human resources recruitment and retention. We also have a certificate for fleet management. Please visit truckload.org's education page to make sure you are maximizing your opportunity to earn the credit and recognition for attending these events. Should you become disconnected from today's event, you may rejoin by clicking the link provided in your registration and reminder emails. Also, a disclaimer has been posted in the chat for today's session. Today's session is being recorded. All webinar registrants will receive an email within 48 hours of the live webinar, which will include instructions and a link to access the recording. Questions can be submitted using the Q&A or chat icon found at the bottom of your screen. We will acknowledge your question once it has been submitted. We would also love to see where everyone is listening in from today. Please let us know by typing that into the chat. It is now my pleasure to hand over the conversation to Aaron Michaels, Channel Sales Manager with PrePass. Aaron, why don't you get us started today?
All right. Thanks, Shayna. And a big thanks to Geotab for sponsoring this event. Hello, everyone. I'm Aaron Michaels, Channel Sales Manager here at PrePass, and I'll be your moderator today. And it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers. First up, Kelly Fry. Kelly is the Chief Revenue Officer at PrePass. As CRO, Kelly is responsible for sales and customer success. He brings 20 plus years of connected vehicle technology experience to the table and has worked for familiar companies such as Big Road, Turnpike Global, Telligis, and Verizon Connect. Welcome, Kelly.
Thanks, Aaron.
We also have Scott Appelfeld, who is the Vice President and a founding member of ASR Solutions. Scott has spent 17 years implementing, supporting, and evangelizing the use of technology in the transportation industry. In his role at ASR, Scott provides consulting, integration, and customized development services for his clients. Welcome, Scott.
Thanks.
Our agenda today is as follows.
Sorry about that, Aaron.
That's okay.
You're happy.
Yeah. So we're going to look at toll risks and opportunities, data integration, reporting and insights, and best practices. Kelly, take it away.
Great. Thanks, Aaron. I'll try and be a little better on the slide transitions going forward. I think anybody who's been around the trucking industry, transportation industry, knows that trucking and transportation is a risky business. In my too many years around this industry, often when you think of risk, you think just of the safety aspect of things because of the extreme nature of what happens when an accident occurs. It's obviously traumatic and can be sometimes fatal to the trucking business itself. But risk comes in a couple of flavors. There certainly is that safety risk of driving a heavy truck on interstate roads and in crowded inner city environments, etc. But there's also risk that comes from a compliance perspective, right? Making sure that you're operating the truck within the regulations. Sometimes people from the outside don't realize that truck drivers are federally regulated employees, right? They can be inspected at any time. They have a certain requirement to have documentation available upon any inspection. And they can be stopped and pulled over at any time to make sure that they are operating within the laws and the regulations that are set out for them. So as I talked about, there's a safety risk that's got to be controlled. There's a compliance risk that's got to be controlled. And in our industry, there's also a financial risk that's got to be understood and controlled. And anybody who's been around this business knows that margins are extremely tight. And if you're not minding the pennies, very often you can get offside on a load or on a lane, and you can find yourself in a risky financial situation as well. So when we talk about the business, I kind of like to use the saying that we sometimes hear in our own personal lives, that there are the certainties in life. There are death and taxes. Why is my screen not progressing here? Hold on one second. Here we go. Boy, oh boy, I think there's a delay on the internet here. But what the certainties in life are death and taxes. But when it comes to the trucking industry, the certainties are regulations, and we like to say tolls. PrePass and what's called the PrePass Safety Alliance, which is a not-for-profit organization that was founded about 28 years ago. And our mission from day one has been to focus on the safety, improving the safety and efficiency of the American transportation system. It's been our goal and mission since day one. And that's allowed us to create the largest way station bypassing network available to across the country, with the most truckers using it. I think we're somewhere north of 750,000 truck drivers using our systems today. What way station bypassing allows you to do is, if you're a well-run fleet that has a good safety record, you can bypass way stations 95% of the time, and sometimes 97% of the time. But as you're rolling across the country, you also are going to incur road tolls. And those tolls are something that you can't really avoid, especially depending upon where you are in the country. So when we think of road tolls and we think of way station bypassing, we think of that connectivity of the truck to the infrastructure. And anybody who's kind of been around the telematics industry for a while, or who even thinks about where's the future going with autonomous trucks, you'll hear this phrase or this term, the connected truck. And that connected truck requires us to have an ecosystem of partnerships in order to allow our customers to get maximum benefit. Today, obviously, we're sponsored and joined by Geotab, who's one of the leading telematics service providers out there. So they give us great information about the truck, how it's operating, where it's located, what its route was, etc. And our other partner that's joining us today is ASR Solutions. They're a data specialist. They help gather as much information as available from that truck to be able to help our mutual customers make better routing decisions. Where should the driver be parking tonight? Is there an available parking spot? These types of decisions are something that we enable, but with our partnership, we can make it very simple for a fleet to take advantage of their telematics solution to stay in touch with the driver, make sure that they're making the best decisions. And we do that by bringing in data from lots of different sources, right? We talked about way stations, we talked about tolling, infrastructure tolling providers that are out there. We take that data, with our partners, and integrate it into routing and dispatch systems and transportation management systems. We can inform shippers and receivers about where their loads are, etc. So that connected vehicle ecosystem is really something that is becoming an imperative and a lot easier to do. An example in our solutions that is becoming quite powerful are driver safety alerts. So alerting a driver to the fact that there's a way station coming, but also there's a steep grade ahead. Make sure you're monitoring your speed, or there's a windy area, or there's a construction zone coming. All of this stuff can be communicated in partnership with a telematics solution provider like Geotab to inform that driver, so they're making that better decision about where to park and what speed they should be going, etc. So it's kind of an exciting time to be in this industry, and it really is something that we're very proud of to achieve our mission of improving that safety and efficiency of the America's Trucking Association or infrastructure. When we talk about tolls, sometimes I'm sure you guys don't think about it as much as we do, but tolls are something that are in about 35 states currently. There's 50 plus different tolling agencies, and those tolling agencies generate about $15 billion annually from commercial fleets. What's interesting about that is if you have to maintain an account and pay a bill to 50 different agencies, and you've got hundreds or perhaps thousands or even dozens of trucks rolling around the nation, it gets complex very, very fast. And if you're not kind of in control and got good visibility to what's going on, you can get offside very quickly. So as I said earlier, that financial risk becomes compounded very fast when you start to think of all of the different relationships and bills and decisions that need to be handled related to tolls. What's certain, though, is that the amount of road tolling is definitely going up. As right now, obviously, there's been lots of talk over the last couple of years about infrastructure and some significant funding that is now going into infrastructure. But America's highways are far behind in terms of the amount of infrastructure investment that needs to take place. And most of those infrastructure dollars today are supposed to come from fuel tax, and a lot of it does. However, over the last several decades, a lot of that fuel tax revenue has been diverted to other projects. It's not actually going into the infrastructure that it's supposed to. So many of the county and state governments and even federal have realized that adding road tolls is a fairly efficient way to generate additional dollars that can go into infrastructure investment. So we know with certainty that the amount of toll agencies is increasing. The number of miles of roadways across North America that are toll roads are increasing. The cost of tolls are increasing. On the horizon, we're starting to hear things such as road use charges being considered, like they have in Oregon with the weight miles tax. There are many jurisdictions, over 50 right now, that are looking at road use charges, and it's potential that those could be coming in the near future, in the not too distant future. We also know that in the Northeast, in Manhattan, there's congestion tolling that's coming. That's going to have to be factored into your routing and dispatch decisions. It's going to have a huge impact potentially on the profitability if you're not able to identify and reclaim those additional toll charges. So when we look at the aggregate numbers of that $15 billion, what's quite startling is over the last 10 years, the amount of road tolls that have been generated from commercial vehicles has actually gone up 73%. If you compare that to GDP in the same time, that's about 17%. So 73% tolls have gone up, GDP's gone up 17%. So you can see that it's a much more rapidly increasing cost to fleets. So definitely something that you want to make sure that you're controlling as you move forward. If we look at what drives tolling cost, I think most of us understand when you go through a toll booth. Back in the day, it was usually handing over cash. There still are some toll booths you have to stop, hand over some cash, and then they'll give you your change back. Increasingly, we're going to all electronic tolling that either uses a transponder in the cab of the vehicle, or sometimes it's a sticker now that has an RFID tag embedded in it, and sometimes it's just a license plate read. What you'll find is that each of the different agencies has a different pricing scheme, and those pricing schemes can give you a better rate if you use a transponder versus a license plate read, or they might give you a better rate at certain times of the day. There's additional discounts available if you achieve certain toll spend limits in a particular month. So what we do at PrePass is we make sure that you are getting the maximum discount available to you, but that's only one part of where toll costs come from. The iceberg analogy works very well here because below the surface of that toll chart that you'll see posted on the sign, you can have very significant costs added for things such as a fine. And some people go, how do I get a fine from a toll authority? Well, one way is if your driver speeds through a toll booth. Several toll agencies will actually levy a very significant fine if you speed through there. So using telematics solutions like Geotab, we can make sure that our drivers are not speeding through, or we can verify, did he in fact speed through, he or she speed through that toll booth or not? So avoiding that's very critical. The other way that toll agencies really can pile on the cost is with late fees. Many of us have seen some of the egregious interest rates that are charged by credit cards. Well, toll agencies are sometimes even worse than that. They put incredibly high late payment penalties upon you. And what's really wonderful is, and I'm saying that ironically, is you're guilty until proven innocent with a toll agency. Because they'll say, hey, here's a violation that you got, pay me. And you say, hold on, I didn't get that violation. I didn't run the entire length of the toll road. And they say, oh, yes, you did. Max toll, $210, pay us. And if you decide not to pay within the 30 days or the 17 days, whatever, 14 days, whatever they give you, all of a sudden they'll tack on a late payment penalty. And they'll tack on an additional charge for an administrative fee. So what happens is very quickly, you can have a low dollar toll charge become a very significant cost. And where it gets real tricky is sometimes they're not even sending you the bill until later, especially if it's a license plate read. So you might get a bill, 14 days after sometimes 30 days after your driver was on that road from the toll agency saying, hey, you got a license plate read. And there's a violation associated to that. Now pay us. And if you don't pay us within 14 days, we're going to add a late payment penalty, right? So it gets ugly very, very fast. And our job is to help avoid all that stuff, right? That's why we consolidate all the toll agencies together into one bill. We dispute the violations on behalf of our customers. We pay everything on time. And so what I'd like to let everybody know is we are not necessarily proponents of toll roads, more toll roads, anything. What we are proponents of is trying to make it efficient and effective for you to manage your toll program. And if you do that, you can avoid what most large fleets and even small fleets that run across the country have, is they often have a lack of visibility to the toll spend. They have a lack of control on that spend. Are my drivers supposed to take the toll road? Did they take it? Did they take it when they weren't supposed to? Did they not take it when I told them to? All that visibility and control that you get with a good toll program can help you better manage your spend, but also reclaim that spend. Also, if you're not paying attention or enough attention, you're open to theft and fraud, right? It doesn't happen pervasively, but it happens often enough to be a concern. A driver can take a toll transponder out of a truck and use it on the weekend to drive the family to the cottage, right? Again, doesn't happen all the time, but when it does happen, it can be quite expensive. There are some bridges up in the Northeast that cost you $90 to drive across if you're a truck, right? But if you're a car, it might be $15, right? So now your driver takes the transponder that thinks it's in a truck, drives across that bridge and incurs a $90 toll charge. And if you're not minding the store, all of a sudden you're going to pay that because you don't know, right? But when you can associate that to GPS location and route data and say, hey, hold on, that transaction occurred when that truck was not moving, right? That transponder was moving, but not the truck, right? All of a sudden you've got an opportunity to reduce theft and fraud and make sure that you're staying in control. And of course, if you are, getting a financial audit and you're saying, hey, that toll charge was incurred for business reasons, but it was not, all of a sudden now you've got the potential IRS risk as well. So without a tolling plan, there is significant risk that we talked about earlier from a financial perspective. So I wanted to give you an example because I probably scared some of you talking about some of those charges, but here's an example of I'm clicking. See if it'll advance now. Sometimes it goes to sleep when I go to advance. Here's an example of a Delaware toll charge. You'll notice here that the toll itself was a $9 toll charge. But because the tolling authority didn't read the RFID reader, or perhaps this truck maybe didn't have a transponder in it, it took a license plate read. And in Delaware, they call that is this Delaware? Yeah, Delaware. Del Dot. They call that a violation. And so on top of the $9, they treat it kind of like a court cost. They say, hey, there's an administrative fee of $25, an ambulance county fee of $10, a combat violent crimes fee of $15, civil penalty of $25, a civil penalty surcharge of $12.50, blah, blah, blah. $96.50 later, you say, hey, that's not fair. I'm going to dispute that. And they say, well, tell you what, pay the bill first, and then I might let you dispute it. You know what? Some toll authorities don't let you dispute it unless you have someone like ourselves who, processes millions and hundreds of millions of dollars. We can go and fight those violations, and that's part of our service charge, right? But once you have the route data, the driver data, the load data to be able to prove that you were there, you had a transponder, you were on that road, it was you got on at Plaza 1, got off at Plaza 3, you didn't run the full toll road. All of a sudden you can return back, and I mean this literally, tens of thousands of dollars to the business, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And we have many, many cases with large fleets where it's millions and sometimes tens of millions of dollars a year in avoided violation fees and penalties that come from the toll agencies. So what we'd like to do is talk to you about how you can reduce some of that risk, and Scott's going to get into detail on how to do that. But whenever I think of risks, I often think of opportunities as well, right? So Scott's going to go into more detail on this in a minute here or so. But when you're rating that load or pricing the load, if you have a better estimated cost of your toll, you have a much better chance of reclaiming that, right? Building it into the rate so that you make sure you're going to stay on the top side and make some profit. There's a risk of visibility. If you're lacking visibility to the spend and the decisions and the transactions your drivers are incurring, you're going to have trouble to manage that. That Peter Drucker statement, the saying that you can't manage what you can't measure, right? Tolling is perfect. An example of that. If you don't know where your spend is and why you're making those toll decisions, how can you possibly control it? You don't know if you're onside or offside, right? Scott's going to actually give us an example a little bit later where there was a trucking company he worked with a few years back that was offside about $40,000 a month on toll spend. And they didn't know it at the time until he helped get that visibility, him and his company get that visibility into that toll spend, and they were able to correct that. And you can imagine what $40,000 in bottom line savings means to a business, but Scott will take us through that in a little bit. The other thing is just allocating those expenses back to the load, the driver, the lane, understanding is it actually, and down to the P&L level too, right? Am I allocating the costs within my large distributed fleet down to the right business unit, right? Are they in control? Are they paying the bills? Are they getting it back? Are they including it in the rate, etc.? All of that kind of bundles together into toll spend control, right? Which I think is very critical. We have part of the solution that we have at PrePass is something called informed tolling. It's part of the service. It's no additional fee, but we try and give the best tools available to make it easy for fleet operators to visualize where are you spending money with each agency. We do some very good reporting and heat mapping about where the spend is coming from, where are the trends going, etc. We have a gaggle of reports available for our customers to view. But I want to make a very important point: is data is great, right? The more data you got, the more visibility you got, the better chance you have of control. But taking that data and integrating it into your back office systems where you're actually making some of those rating decisions, where you're actually, generating the invoice, you're actually looking at profitability of the job, the load, the lane. You're verifying if your drivers were they allowed to make the decision? Are they following the business rules? Are you allocating the expense back to your owner operator, right? Are you reconciling properly? If you can do that with a data integration and an automated download into your TMS, your transportation management solution, then you got a much better chance of visibility, control, right? Job costing, all the stuff that Scott's going to take us through now. Just before we do that, I'd like to, if we could, just take a quick poll of which transportation management systems you're using. If you could, we put up kind of the bigger names here. If you could just click on some of those while we transition over to Scott here in a second, I'd appreciate it to be able just to get an idea which TMS you guys are using. So we've got, while you do that, we've got Pro Transport, TMW Suite, TruckMate, Innovative Computing, TL2000, Loadmaster from McLeod, and we know there's many others out there. Each one of these TMS systems, has its unique capabilities. Pro Transport, great partner of ours, as is TMW and McLeod. ASR, Scott will tell you, has some good experience working with all of these different solutions to do that data integration. So I think, Shayna, that's probably enough time on the poll. We'll share some of that information perhaps after we're done today. And then Scott, if you could take it away.
Thanks, Kelly. I appreciate it. So hello, everyone. I'm Scott Appelfeld. I'm one of the founding members of ASR. I want to tell you a little bit about ASR, but I also want to finish that story Kelly led in with because it was a really good one. So let me just fill in some background on who ASR is, because I know PrePass and Geotab are big names, but you may not have heard of us. So we were founded in 2005. We've been in business for 17 years now. We are partners with Geotab and PrePass, as well as resellers and marketplace partners for Geotab. Our general experience has been really focused around TMS. We were customers who went on to become consultants, who went on to provide services on integrating, training, using different dispatch systems. And that experience really led us to be very familiar with both the trucking side as ex-customers of those platforms, as users of those platforms, and the technology side as integrators and developers and consultants on those platforms. So really our business value has always been that we can understand real world trucking issues and challenges that you face day to day, and can understand the systems that you have and what you need to be able to tie them together and solve that real world business challenge. I was very, very excited when Geotab introduced us to PrePass, and we got the opportunity to learn about what they did and the kind of data they had access to. And this ties directly into the story that Kelly was telling. Prior to our introduction to PrePass and the ability to work on what I'm going to share with you today, the closest we had ever been able to get to really understanding and helping a customer realize toll costs was to use the same tools that they had used previously, PC Myler, Rand McNally, and create our own process of running them through dispatch systems. So we had a customer who came to us who said, I know on my financials that I am losing a lot of money all of a sudden. Tolls have gone way up, but I don't know where. I don't know why. I can't find them. And so we created a process using the tools we had at that time, PC Myler, and analyzed the order versus the dispatch versus what they billed, looked at the tolls each way, and were able to identify a gap where a single customer that had been newly onboarded, they had priced out and planned to charge tolls on them and had not set the rates up properly, and therefore were losing $40,000 a month. I think it was 42 actually, in that new customer. And that was where they had seen the increase. And now they knew who it was, what lanes were affected, and they could go back to the rating, go back to the contracts, go back to all the pieces and get that money back. So understanding why that's such a special story and why that's so important kind of requires you to take a step back for a moment. And I know this may seem obvious to some of you, but I want to talk about the actual business of trucking and why tolls are such a special challenge, why they're so different. So obviously everyone knows that you don't run a truck for fun. You don't run it just because. You run a truck because you are being paid to carry freight from A to B. You are charging someone for that work to cover your costs for moving that freight. High level numbers, I believe TCA has published some numbers with their group that says the typical revenue is about $4,000 a truck a month, lower in some industries, higher in others, but let's use that as a simple average. There have also been numerous studies that have said that most trucking companies run an operating ratio in the mid to high 90s. I think everyone knows this. You live and die by pennies on the dollar. So if you take both of those assumptions, if you say that you run an operating ratio of 95 and each truck generates $4,000 in revenue a month, that means your bottom line profit every month per truck is only $200. So PrePass has shared with me that across their customer base, the average truck incurs $200 in toll costs every month. Now, obviously, in my example, those toll costs are included in the $3,800 or so of costs that you're managing before your bottom line profit. But you can see how close the numbers are. If you can better manage your tolls or you mismanage your tolls, you can completely erase or greatly enhance that bottom line profit every single month. Now, obviously, when you're being paid to carry freight down the road, one of the main ways you decide what you're paid is you price a lane. So the challenges to pricing a lane effectively are you have to come up with a competitive market rate for the line haul. You have to, be where the market is, be able to price in a way that the customer is okay with, and sort of balance that against the revenue and costs that you need to find. In addition to the line haul, there are a number of accessorial charges that are very common. Things like fuel surcharge, which you often aim to pass through as closely as possible to your real cost. Things like detention, which a telematics system or a TMS can help you capture by recognizing arrivals and departures and getting that information back to the customer. Miscellaneous charges like lumpers and things that you'll often get a receipt from the driver for, be able to tie back to it. But tolls are a unique accessorial because historically they have only been estimated, not actual. You use a software like PC Miler or Rand McNally that says, if you drive this route exactly this way with this type of truck, here will be your toll costs. And you have to assume that everything goes exactly as planned for those costs to be accurate. So the reason toll costs are different is because actual costs very rarely match what you estimated. As Kelly talked about earlier, the toll could read incorrectly. Dispatch may choose to route this shipment differently than it was originally tendered when you booked it in your system. The driver may not follow the route you expected and may drive it differently, incurring more or less toll costs. The agency may have increased the fees since your estimation software applied that cost and you did that contract with the customer. The other problem is that because those actual costs often come in so slow, they may be, without a system like PrePass, they may be receipts turned in by the driver, days, weeks, or months after the fact. Even with PrePass, the agency can take time to collect and get you that data. So it is not uncommon to receive the data much later and in bulk. You simply know the transponder that traveled through a particular agency and incurred a particular charge on a given date. So being able to actually take that information back to dispatch data, which is what caused you to move down the road in the first place, has almost been impossible up till now. So effectively managing toll costs, just like other accessorials, requires combining data with from a toll payment provider, a telematics system, and a transportation management system. And so that is what the partnership with PrePass and Geotab allowed us to do. We were finally able to combine data in a way that we had always wanted to and always had customers want us to. We could take the file data from PrePass, who now knew what the transponder was, what the unit was, what the plate was, where the event occurred, who the agency was, and then cross-reference that to a telematics system like Geotab and say, where was the truck? Did the license match? Was it moving when we expected it to be? What driver was signed in for ELD purposes at that time? How all that tied out. Even cross-reference location data, lat long data, so you can be sure that you have the right spot and then know exactly what time it occurred to take it back to your dispatch system. Once you bring those two together, you can look up in a dispatch system where that truck or driver or equipment was at that moment to figure out what dispatch was active. And finally, by knowing the dispatch, you can now bring everything together You know the customer, you know the lane, you know the shipper, the consignee, you know what you billed on that particular shipment, you know what you would have expected on that particular shipment. So you're able to combine the data in a way that truly gives context to the information. So having all of that data together gives you insight that you can truly measure your tolls. You can measure whether you price the lane appropriately. You can measure whether driver behavior is anomalous. Does one driver incur much more tolls than other drivers when he takes the same lane? Is he often driving the route differently? Did the truck actually show up at that spot when you expected because the telematics data says it was somewhere else, or was it on the same place? So this is what we were able to do. At this point in time, much of the analytics are still on the customer side. We bring the data down into the system. We create the analytics based on specific questions that we're aiming to answer once we have the combined data set. And we can provide that back to each customer with the type of insights and the data they want that's pertinent to their lanes and their use of the TMS. That concludes the high-level overview, kind of giving insight into the process, how it all ties together, and what we're able to produce. So I think at this point, we'd like to take some questions from the group about the solution.
Yes, we would. Thank you, Scott and Kelly. That was awesome information. And yeah, there are a few questions here. I've got them in a couple of spots. Let's start with what was in the chat. And we've answered some of these in the chat. The first one is, Shana, will you talk about the recording? A couple people want to know about this call being recorded.
Sure, no problem. We will be providing the recording 48 hours after the live webinar. So I will send an email to everyone and you'll receive a link and instructions on how to view the recording. So everyone will have access if you registered for the webinar.
Okay, perfect. Kelly, I think you might have already answered this, but Carrie asked something about the way that we classified charges in the Northeast.
Yeah, there were what I was referring to there is there's something coming in New York City called congestion tolling, which is very similar to something you may have heard like in London, England, as an example. You're only allowed to go into the city on certain days based upon your license plate, last digit on your license plate or something. And you're charged a toll in order to do that. If you violate that and end up going in there anyway, you can get a very significant penalty. New York's doing something kind of similar called congestion tolling, which will have a cost. I believe it's to go onto the island of Manhattan on certain days and certain times. So it's going to have a huge impact on anybody that is obviously delivering freight, delivering services into Manhattan. You're going to have to start to include this into your routing decision, right? What time of day should I go? What day of week should I go? Should I go? Right? Because if you're not able to reclaim it, as Scott said, you can be giving up your entire profitability for the day just on that toll road. So that's something that's already being contemplated, not only in New York City. It's already, the contract's been awarded and it will happen. COVID did delay it, but it's being contemplated in other cities. Seattle, I believe, Houston, and others are looking at that same scenario.
All right, thanks, Kelly. Someone asked if what Kelly and Scott talked about today, if Geotab is required. And while no, the answer is no, this could, all of this could happen with various telematic service providers. You just want to make sure that you're using someone that that gives really good data, open to integration, that you can extract the data from your telematics service provider in an easy way for companies like ASR to ingest. So those are really the key elements.
One thing to add to that, Aaron. So
Sure.
Really, in theory, any telematics provider can enhance the data you get from tolling, which is part of the value of what you need. The reason that Geotab is such a great partner for this example is because they have such a plethora of data. They have location almost second by second. You can always tell exactly, when a driver was in or out of a truck, what speed it was moving, other data points like that. So that really helps you find anomalous tolling events and be able to sort of call out exceptions or issues with tolls that can help you better manage their cost and verify that they were accurate. With other telematics providers, you can do that. It's just you won't have quite the same level of accuracy because you may not have a position at exactly the moment, the second that you went through that tolling event. You may just know within 10 or 15 minutes of that you were close to it. So, so while it can work with any telematics system, the more accurate in real time your telematics system is, the better output the data will be.
Love the additional detail there. Thank you, Scott. Scott, and actually this one's for you. It says, ASR can provide a solution utilizing innovative TMS and OmniTrax telematics.
Yes, we could. At a high level, we could. Let me speak to a couple of specifics there. So we have a partnership with a number of other people who have companies similar to ourselves, integrators, data specialists, consultants in the transportation industry. And we each tend to work on the systems we're most familiar with. For ASR, those systems are TMW Suite, Loadmaster, TL2000. For some of our partners, they're systems like TruckMate and Innovative. So while any of us could work on those systems, I would probably discuss with that customer who the best partner would be to take that data and work on that process together and bring it in so that it could work with that particular TMS. So short answer, I believe, is yes, but it would be worth having a conversation about for more detail.
Okay, awesome. Also for you, Scott, so does this integrate with McLeod? And I believe that was on your list.
Yes, actually. So the first couple of customers we've been using this process with are TMW Suite customers, but McLeod is actually the next system that we're in the process of integrating it to. So essentially the same process of bringing in PrePass data, tying it to a telematics system, enhancing it, and then doing the dispatch lookup applies. It's just slightly different tables that you're looking in to get the McLeod data. So yeah, it absolutely does work with McLeod. We'd love to talk to a prospect who's interested in exploring that with us.
Yeah, and if I could, just a shout out, and those are good partners. And just as there's a question here about which TMS which one do you recommend? And Scott answered it well, which is it's specific to what type of business you're doing, right? What, if you're not, the largest of the large fleet, sometimes, a TMW or a McLeod might be too much for you, right? If you're a small, mid-sized fleet, someone like a Pro Transport could be the right solution. If you're less than truckload, there might be one TMS better than if you're truckload, or if you're a dry bulk carrier versus a dry van carrier, right? Like it all comes down to what you're trying to achieve. So the TMS decision is complicated, but what you want to make sure is your TMS provider makes it easy to integrate external data like toll data, right? Do they have a way to visualize that toll data? Do they charge you extra for integrating an API, right? All of those things could come into play, and someone like ASR can help you kind of navigate that, right? Like, what can you do on your own, Mr. Customer? Because Scott will tell you this too. Hey, there's some customers that are more than capable, some fleets more than capable to do their own data integration, set up their own API or secure file transfer protocol, and he's happy to give them some advice on what to do. But if they need a little extra help, right, and maybe don't have the resources available at that time, that's where someone like an integrator like ASR can come in and really help them.
Thanks, Kelly. Let me read this one here, and this one's for you as well, Kelly. So it said, hey, you had mentioned how violation fees can sometimes become $50 or $100 per toll. What are some of the specific ways to avoid these violation fees? And does PrePass charge for disputing violation for their customers? So two parts.
Yeah, so the most critical thing to do is understand on what toll road you're running, what's the way to maximize your discount and avoid a violation. And usually that is if you use a transponder or a sticker, and either of those are viable solutions. If you're running across the country, you want to have a device that can handle all of the agencies. We have something called Elite Pass that covers you at all agencies and all way stations across the country, where we've got our system enabled, which is we cover virtually all toll agencies other than perhaps the odd bridge or something that we haven't found yet. So that's number one, is make sure you've got a transponder if you're running nationwide to get the maximum discount. If they take a license plate read instead of a transponder, they're going to often charge you more. And the reason for that is the toll agency has to do, it's called LPR, license plate read. They have to take that image, upload it to a computer, then go to the DMV, figure out who's the beneficial owner of that vehicle, right? So they have to pay the DMV for that lookup. So they add charges on top of that. And those can be very significant, as we talked about. In our service, when it comes to violations, we don't charge a fee for processing those violations and fighting those violations. So let's say you've got a truck, it's got a transponder, and it goes through a toll booth, but for whatever reason, the toll reader didn't read, and it takes a picture of your license plate. Well, you're going to get a violation in the mail, right? So what you do with that, if you're a PrePass customer, is you email it to us, you take a picture of it and send it to us, or you go onto our system and say, hey, I received a violation. We then dispute that on your behalf with the agency, and we recoup your money, and we give 100% of that back to you. We don't charge for that.
Awesome. Thanks, Kelly. Shane, I've got one more here and then we'll check on time. So let me read this one. Do you have examples of carriers passing actual toll costs onto their customers afterwards, other than updating future bids or contracts?
I'd love to speak to this one. So this is something we've actually been in active discussion with, sort of weighing the pros and cons, because once you have the data and it's tied to a load, in theory, you can bill the actual charge. The problem is delay. As Kelly noted, sometimes the agency doesn't always read the transponder. Sometimes they get a plate read, and sometimes those plate reads can take a week or 8 or 9 days or however long it takes for the agency to get it to you. And you don't want to be holding up your invoices to confirm that. So we're sort of discussing different ways to tackle that. Some of the ideas that were presented were you can sort of average for that lane what the actual toll costs are by looking at all of the good data you did have and then use that average for billing. Or you could just identify when you don't have an actual toll cost associated or it varies differently from the average and flag that invoice to be held until you do get the final read and the actual toll cost later. So it can be done. It's just important to sort of think about the timing aspect and the impact that could potentially have on billing and how you want to address that.
Yeah, there's something else, Aaron, if I could just add to that, is we've also seen some companies that most people think of tolls as a cost center, right? I incurred a cost, now I'm going to try and reclaim it. There are some fleets that I think do something very smart and reasonable, is they can use it as a bit of a profit center as well. And what I mean by that is, if the license plate read toll is $20 or the cash rate is $30, but the transponder rate is $10, right? And so there's a difference of $10 to $20 between each of those three different solutions. The shipper receiver is not paying you for the transponder and the service that you are putting in place, right? So why do you have to pass through the full discounted rate on a load, right? There's potential to keep some of that as profit, right? So that's something that we do see. It's not pervasive, but I think it's a good way to make an accessorial charge potentially worth a little bit, because you are dealing with the violations sometimes that'll occur, all right? Penalty fees, right? You're not there, your shipper's not saying, hey, let me help you out with those. Right? So why can't you take a little bit on the other side as well? I think it's a very reasonable thing.
I think we addressed most of the questions. I apologize if we missed any between the chat and the Q&A. You can always contact us on the information that you see on your screen here. But I feel inspired to give a summary of what we just witnessed, right? So the information from Scott and Kelly. So if you stuck around this long, you get the bonus summary. Tolling is a dynamic part of the trucking business, right? It's forever changing. Using companies like PrePass, we're creating visibility where you don't have it today. And then if you pair that visibility into the type of analytics and data that you get from a great telematics provider like Geotab, Now you're helping, like Kelly said, dispute some of those transactions or confirm that maybe that those transactions weren't yours, reducing the cost of the business. And then you pair both of those things to a solutions provider like ASR that can ingest that data, put it into your backend system, and give you even a greater level of visibility into what's transpiring within your business. I really think that it's a compelling situation that really every trucking company should look into. That's the way I summarize all that, Kelly.
Good job, Aaron. Well,
Thank you.
I do appreciate it. Again, I just want to shout out to Geotab and to Scott at ASR. Thank you. You guys are good partners. We appreciate what we've been able to do mutually for our customers. And again, our mission, improve the safety and efficiencies of Americans' transportation system is what we're dedicated to. So if we can do more of that, that makes our customers happier. That makes us happier. And we're pleased to continue to innovate with you guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Kelly. Shane, we're going to turn it back over to you to close us out.
Great. Thank you. Excellent. Thank you so much to our speakers today for such a great conversation and very impactful session. For our attendees, thank you for joining us. And once again, we would like to encourage you to enroll in any of TCA certificate programs to earn credit for your attendance and participation in today's event. We have also provided contact information for each of our speakers, so you can reach out to them following today's webinar if you have some additional questions or you want to continue the conversation. When the webinar closes, you will be redirected to an online survey. We ask that you take a moment to fill it out. And this concludes our webinar. I'd like to wish everyone a wonderful afternoon and thank you again.